Hello, before we deep dive into the subject, let me tell you about the agenda. The whole idea of studying this topic is to understand the valuation of inventory and process costing. The inventory I'm talking about are finished goods and closing work in process, also known as ending work in process. Finished goods are the units that are complete in all respect, which is ready for sale. Closing WIP units are the units that are in process yet to be completed. This valuation of inventory can be done during any period end. It can be end of the year, it can be end of the quarter, or it can be end of the month. To understand how the valuation of inventory is to be done, you need to know certain basic things. I'm going to start from scratch by telling you about the meaning of a process and the type of processes. Then I will move on to tell you about the costs that go into the product and how those costs are categorized for calculation purpose. I will tell you about the features of a process costing and the industries where process costing is employed. I'm going to tell you about the 8 steps you need to follow to arrive at the value of inventory. After this, I will introduce spoilage, tell you about what the spoilage is and how that needs to be treated under process costing. Finally, I will end the session by telling you about the benefits and the limitations of a process costing. Throughout the session, I'll be giving many examples. I'll be taking you through many illustrations and I'll be solving all of the support package questions. Let's start by understanding the meaning of a process and type of processes. There are many cost accumulation systems out there. Cost accumulation systems enable one to arrive at product cost or a service cost. For your CMA exams, you need to know about job order costing system, operations costing system, process costing system, activity based costing system, and life cycle costing system. Today's focus is on learning about process costing system. Operation costing system is amalgam of a job order costing system and process costing system. Of all these 5, it is said activity based costing system provides most accurate product cost or a service cost. At the same time, it's very time consuming to implement and it's very expensive to implement. Let us understand the meaning of the word process. Process is nothing but a series of steps that leads to value addition. This can happen with or without transformation of raw material to finished goods. In case of a manufacturing industry, the transformation of raw material to finished goods happens. In case of a service industry, value addition happens by delivery of service. There are 2 types of processes. One is a departmentalized process and another is a non-departmentalized process. Here is the physical flow of units in a departmentalized process. In a departmentalized process, there will be many departments carrying on many processes. I am here talking about candle manufacturing industry. Typically in a candle manufacturing industry, raw materials like wax, wicks and scents are poured into a mold in department 1. Then the mold is moved to the second department where the mold is heated. The heated mold after some time is taken to third department where the mold is cooled down. The mold is taken out, the inside candles are removed and any excess wax attached to the candles are also removed. The candles are polished, they are checked for quality, they are packed and moved to warehouse. This is how candle manufacturing happens. Now let us see in each process what goes in as input and what comes out as output. The opening WIP will be an input for each process. These are the units yet to be processed. They are already there in the process. Then there is going to be some units that are going to be introduced if it's the first process, or there are going to be some transferred in units from the previous processes. Coming to outputs, there will be closing work in process units that are yet to be completed, and then the finished goods if it's the last process, or there are going to be some transferred out units if it is not the last process. Here is the physical flow of a units in non-departmentalized process. I am taking the example of car industry. In case of a car industry, typically there is going to be one single continuous process. It will have opening work in process if it's not the first year of operations, and then some production inputs go into the process. At the end of a particular period, there is going to be closing work in process and some finished products that are manufactured during the period. Let's see what goes in as input and what comes out as output from the process. It will have opening WIP to start with, and then some units are going to be introduced. These constitute input units. Output units are going to be closing work in process units and finished goods units. Let us move on to understand what costs go into the product and how those costs are categorized for valuation purpose. Total product cost under process costing will have direct cost, also known as prime cost, and indirect cost, also known as overheads. Under direct cost, we will have direct material. These are the material costs that go into the product. And then we will have direct labor. This consists of labor wages paid on a piecemeal basis. Under the overheads, we will have variable overhead costs. The example of variable overhead costs are indirect material like coolant and sealants, indirect labor like the labor expenses of a cleaner, and indirect expenses like the water expenses. Direct material, direct labor, and variable overhead costs together are known as variable costs. And then we will have fixed overhead costs under overheads. These are the costs that do not change as production volume changes. The example are depreciation expenses, salary of a plant manager, etc. Let me tell you about the behavior of a variable cost and fixed cost using a graph. Let's say on a Cartesian plane, here is the x-axis and here is the y-axis. Let me put units on x-axis, cost on y-axis. The total variable cost line on a Cartesian plane looks like this. This is total variable cost line. You can see here that as units produced goes on increasing, the total variable cost line also increases. Let's see how on a Cartesian plane fixed overhead cost looks like. Here we have x-axis. Again we have units on x-axis. And here is the y-axis with cost on y-axis. The total fixed cost line will lie parallel to x-axis. This is total fixed cost line. Here we see that as the units produced goes on increasing, the total fixed cost do not change. They remain same irrespective of number of units produced. There are two categories of inventory costing system for cost accumulation under process costing. Just now we saw that the total product costs that go into a product are direct material, direct labor, production variable overhead, and production fixed overhead. All these four costs go into a product cost under absorption costing. There is another costing system known as variable costing system where only three costs are considered: direct raw material cost, direct labor cost, and production variable overhead cost. Only these three costs go into a product under variable costing. Variable costing is used for internal decision making. Absorption costing has to be followed for US GAAP reporting. Under both the methods, the cost incurred by the company will not change. It will remain the same. Only the product costs change under the two methods. If nothing specifically mentioned regarding the cost accumulation system to be followed in any question, assume that absorption costing has to be followed. Let's look at how categorization of costs are done for valuation of inventory under process costing. The total production cost can be broken down into three categories: direct labor cost, direct material cost, and production overheads, under which we will have variable overhead and fixed overhead. Sometimes we may observe that direct labor costs are minimum. They are not substantial. In such a case, direct labor costs are added to production overheads, and we will have only two categories of a cost for valuation of inventory under process costing. In such a scenario, the total of overheads and the labor costs are known as conversion costs. Let's understand flow of cost in process costing. In process costing, costs move from one department to another department or one process to another process in a departmentalized setting. Each of the process may have an opening WIP and a closing WIP. Or the company may just have one process with opening WIP and closing WIP. The raw material costs may be incurred in each of these processes. Remember that when direct material is purchased, no costs move in the processes. Only when direct material is issued to the process, the cost of raw material starts moving. The direct labor cost and factory overhead costs are evenly incurred throughout the process. These together are known as conversion costs. This was discussed earlier. From the last process, costs move to finished goods inventory. Some costs move to closing WIP2. And from finished goods inventory, costs move to cost of goods sold when goods are actually sold. This cost of goods sold gets reflected in income statement. The cost when incurred in the processes may be measured using actual, standard or normal cost measurement system. Let us move on to study the features of a process costing system and the industries where the process costing is followed. Process costing is a cost accumulation system where products are mass produced and all the products will be standardized products. The process costing will be a continuous repetitive process. In the process costing system, all the costs that are incurred are averaged over the number of units produced. This is done because to track each product cost is not practicable and it is not cost effective also. By averaging, I mean the total cost incurred in a process is taken and it is divided by the number of units produced. Here is the example of the industries where process costing is used. It's used in food process industry, oil industry, paint industry, pharmaceutical industry, and so on. It's also employed in service industry such as postal delivery organization, credit card industry, etc. Let me take a short break now and come back after 15 minutes. Once I am back, I will tell you about 8 steps that you can logically follow to arrive at valuation of inventory.